Trump's high tariff trade policy, we kind of tap in this issue that has affected many Quad members. Could this present a challenge to a deeper cooperation within the group, Stephen?
Well, I think it depends. You just have to look at country by country. Among the Quad countries, between the United States and the remaining 3 Quad countries, let's look at India. I think U.S.-India trade talks could be tricky. I think the news reports indicate that there have been some progress. Whether or not both countries can strike a trade deal in the next couple of weeks remain to be seen. But I think comparatively, I would understand that the United States has a higher degree of tolerance and the willingness to strike the deal with India. Japan is a different story. I think it's getting tough and rough to getting into a sensible trade deal between the United States and Japan as we speak right now. We're monitoring the situation as to how Japanese negotiation team will be able to come back with something and to strike the deal to come up with a solution with the United States on the trade pact. We don't know. Australia relatively more straightforward. So you really have to look at each and every country in terms of the trade tariff policies for the past few months, in the next couple of months, will negatively affect or impact the solidarity, for lack of a better term, of the trade partners. But overall, I would say that when it comes to the geopolitical and security issue, when it comes to leveling the playing field, facing the threat of China, and also when it comes to how to continue to deter and increase the capability, military and otherwise, in the Indo-Pacific region, I think somehow it detached to a certain extent, not necessarily 100%, with the trade relationship, with the trade policy. So we remain hopeful that one would not severely and significantly impact the other. But this is a very hot topic that remains to be seen in the next couple of weeks.
Right, Kai-Jun, this is a very important question because Stephen mentioned that we should look at the bilateral relation between the United States and each member of the Quad members, right? So, I mean, is the timing very different now from Trump 1.0 that Quad should not be viewed as an entity. Instead, it should be viewed as an individual country, not only when it comes to security, but also comes to trade.
Yeah, this is again a very difficult things to kind of predict in terms of how each capitals of these 4 countries expect what this organization is going to become or arrangement is going to become in the future. I think within this region, Indo-Pacific region, we countries are used to this idea that security and economic partnerships should be somehow connected together. But what we're seeing in this new administration in Washington is that they want to view this in very separate issues, right? I think the capitals in this region can be assured that on the military and security side, I think there's a consensus that we need to cooperate tighter together to perhaps create stronger deterrence against any aggressors who want to change the status quo. But again, when it comes to the economics part, I think all of us are anxiously waiting for the letters that just sent it out or sent out last week to the 10 or 12 countries around the world. I think the biggest question at this point, or the concern, is that what's going to impact the domestic politics with all these different countries. For example, Japan is currently a minority government. What are some sort of the capacities for the governing parties in these Quad members to kind of explain to the electorates, explain to their populations, or how would they compensate for, in the worst case scenario, a very high tariff? That remains to be seen, and that's going to create certain levels of political instability in those places.
Another update is, although Rubio has reiterated that Quad nations are vital strategic partners and that the summit refocused attention on the Indo-Pacific, he actually started to cancel his visit to Japan and South Korea. opting instead to remain in Washington, in D.C., for a meeting between Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This decision has drawn considerable attention. So my next question is that, unlike his predecessor, Rubio waited more than 5 months to plan his first visit to Asia, only to postpone trips to Japan and South Korea, two of the U.S. allies in East Asia. Does this suggest that Trump administration is making a strategic choice between its Middle East and Indo-Pacific allies? Stephen?
Well, I don't think so. I like to look at this issue from a different angle. I think it's just simply because of the fact that for the past few months, the global hotspots have been Ukraine, Middle East, specifically Israel, Hamas, and Israel and Iran. So I think the focal points and the attentions and resources have been devoted to those international regional hotspots. But I think the overall geopolitical strategy in terms of focusing or refocusing on Indo-Pacific regions by the United States, the way that I see it, that remains unchanged. So I don't necessarily look at this issue simply from the fact that Rubio canceled its scheduled trip to South Korea and Japan, or Rubio hasn't officially, in his capacity as the Secretary of State, visited Asian countries to indicate that there might be some strategic choice, there might be some shift in focus. Because remember that when Trump's first term, in the beginning, lots of doubt about what Trump's going to do in Asia Pacific. Then he initiated the Indo-Pacific strategy. Then there is a new designation in the Pentagon for the Indo-Pacific. Then there is an Indo-Pacific strategic report issued by the Pentagon. So then Biden administration became into power, and people thought that there may be some shift.
Right.
Then
action not much.
The action remains, and then you see Squad, and then you see AUKUS, so on and so forth. Now, as I alluded to earlier in your show, Trump became president again, and people say, well, maybe there's no more Squad, no more AUKUS, no more Quad. But then you see, we talked about this just earlier, then Quad seems to expand. So I would say that in terms of the Indo-Pacific strategies, as we see as currently developed and continue by the State Department's, the National Security Council, and the security team overall of the United States, I don't see a big shift in focus, and I don't see this strategic shift. And simply because of the fact that now we see immediate attention on Iran and Iraq and Hamas and Ukraine and Russia. But sooner or later, at a certain point in time, I think it will be the focus will be back to Indo-Pacific region.
Is it fair for us to argue that we should separate the presidency from the president? Because Trump himself, if you carefully, closely monitor what he said since the January 20th this year, he did not really specifically talk about the Indo-Pacific, even though the strategy was initiated by Shinzo Abe, the former Japanese prime minister. Right. But Trump popularized it. So would you say that we should separate Trump, the person, from his administration when it comes to the Indo-Pacific strategy?
I agree that I don't see President Trump himself talking a lot, if at all, about Indo-Pacific, using that phrase, Indo-Pacific, so on and so forth. But his presidency and his administration seems to continue what has been built upon and what has been continued to operate by the Biden administration in terms of the Indo-Pacific strategies. You see, as I just mentioned, AUKUS and Quad and so on and so forth. So we're looking into any signal that there is a change or shifting focus or strategy, but we haven't found any. We cannot simply assume that simply because the fact that President Trump has said very little about the Indo-Pacific, quote unquote, or has no particular interest in tweeting around those terms, and then to come up with a conclusion that there's a change in strategy. I don't think so. But that of course that's a good topic. That's a good issue that remains to be monitored.
Okay. Kai-Jun, can we still say that Indo-Pacific remains as a top strategic priority for the U.S.?
Well, I would absolutely say that it remains the top strategic priority for the United States. Well, diplomatically, there might be some rooms for speculations for people. You cannot avoid that when you actually postpone this very important trip, right? But however, if we look at, for example, the positions from the the DoD, the Department of Defense, whether or not it's about Secretary Hexex, it's very strong and firm languages in the Shangri-La dialogue, to the completion of the restructuring of U.S. forces, Japan, as interoperability with the Japanese Self-Defense Force, also to the recently made report, I think it's on May, about a Pentagon's paper basically defining the U.S. priority as #1 deterring China's aggressions in Taiwan, and also focusing on home defense, right? So I will say, if you look from the context of security commitments or security arrangements and plannings, it still remains a top priority for the U.S.